Okay, good morning. How are we doing today? Couple of things I want to point out. One, I know we haven't done all the case studies yet. We've got like 3 days, 2 days at the end of the semester where you were going to present your research. Now your research project is simply a put together the presentation, upload it to Blackboard. So those last two class periods there, I'm going to reserve for discussion boards on the case studies. I'll create the thread to get it started, and then those folks who are responsible for those case studies will start the thread and get the discussion going by giving a brief synopsis of the case study, and everybody else will then comment on the case study having read it themselves as well. So that means everybody's got to read the case studies. A little better discussion than we got from some of the case studies we had before in class. I think that'll get us moving forward. The second thing I want to point out is the homework for the just-in-time we're talking about today is actually getting your certification in just-in-time, in Lean. So if you go to Blackboard, you'll see the instructions there. Go to 6sigmaonline.org, click on the white belt for Lean Six Sigma. You will see there a whole listing of different topic areas that you can get your white belt certification in. Pick the one that's closest to your major. I want to make this beneficial. One, it gives you a little extra training in just-in-time and Lean. And at the same time, it gives you a certification, a white belt certification in Lean Six Sigma in your major area. So in addition to completing the homework assignment, all you do is upload a copy of your certificate that you get. In addition to that, you get a bullet to put on your resume to show you got a certification in Six Sigma, which hopefully will help open some doors, or at least put you a little farther ahead of the competition when you look at the resumes and start looking at jobs. So what I want to do today is talk a little bit about just-in-time, Lean, Six Sigma, theory of constraints to introduce the topic to you. I think I laid it out fairly well in the slides with some annotations on the slides and some pictures in the slides. Most of them from my redneck world of NASCAR, which like everybody else is shut down right now. And in the chapter, kind of skim through the chapter on just-in-time to get a feel for some of the background. And I know this kind of puts a little more onus on you to almost self-teach. That's why I want to do the video here and kind of give you the highlights and some of the background so you'll know where we're coming from, so the slides and the reading will all make sense to you. Just-in-time, if you recall, we mentioned this the very first week of class, way back in January. We had all those dates and times of the history of operations management, kind of building how we got to where we're at now. And we said that in the 50s and 60s, if it said made in America, it was, or excuse me, made in Japan, it was considered a joke. And then all of a sudden, with the introduction of Honda and Toyota and Nissan in the automobile industry, all of a sudden in the early 70s, the words made in Japan became synonymous with quality. Everybody want to know, how did they do this? How did they get to being a joke to being the standard for quality? They started looking at what was being done. A couple of guys, Taiichi Ohno and a guy named Shingeo Shingo, came up or wrote about the Toyota production system. Basically, how they did their planning process, how they did their manufacturing process, how they did their supply chain processes. You know, we didn't call it supply chain then. And they wrote about this and called it the Toyota production system. Obviously written in Japanese. The first translation of this became just-in-time. And in fact, the first interpretation of just-in-time by the American Production Inventory Control Society, or APICS, which is now the Association for Supply Chain Management. Their first cut at this said, we're going to call this zero inventories. They focused on one small piece of just in time and came out with this whole series of the zero inventory papers. So when you look at the slide deck, you'll see I've got the definition there of just in time from APICS. And I like this definition, one, because they obviously got rid of their craniorectal inversion and realized it wasn't just zero inventories, it was more than that. And two, because it mentions that it's a continuous process improvement program. Just in time is seen as both a continuous process improvement methodology, continually walking the process, looking at what we're doing, how can we do it better, why are we doing this? Same thing we talked about when we talked about process design a month ago. But it's also seen by some companies as a inventory methodology. So this is a great time to discuss the fallacies or the shortcomings of just-in-time as an inventory methodology. We're seeing it right now. The empty spots on the shelf is because people went to just-in-time on the shelf and just-in-time resupply from the suppliers and distribution centers. The problem with that is, and we saw the same thing in the Army getting ready for the last Gulf War. The Army had done the same thing. In fact, the entire Department of Defense had done the same basic thing. They reduced the inventory levels to make the Army more mobile. The problem was they reduced the inventory levels throughout the entire supply chain. Same thing we're seeing now. To make just-in-time work as an inventory methodology, somebody's got to have the stuff somewhere. As we're seeing on the shelves right now, even though this is kind of a weird buying habit because people are still buying in bulk. As I mentioned, we talk about inventory. The lady that told me they had toilet paper at the natural food store had 4 12-packs, 48 rolls. Not exactly the normal inventory levels. But the problem, what we're seeing now, is because everybody in the supply chain reduced their inventory levels down to be just in time. Again, focusing on that inventory piece only. The problem with that is somebody's got to have it. If nobody's got it, as we discovered in 2003 in the Army, and we're discovering now in 2020 in the pandemic panic buying, if somebody in the supply chain doesn't have it, supply chain is going to run out. So I'm not a big fan. And all the way back to 2003 when we got bit in the butt by a shortage of repair parts and critical supplies prepping for the Gulf War. Since then, I've not been a big fan of just-in-time as an inventory methodology. I used to be a great proponent of it until I saw that when it's not done right, it bites you in the butt. That's exactly what happened then with the Army and now with the commercial supply chains. I think as a inventory methodology has got some extreme shortfalls and misunderstandings still. As a continuous process improvement methodology, I think it's got applications for everybody in any form of business. That's why I think it's critical that we look at it as part of this course and that you look at 6Sigma Lean just in time as a certification program as part of the homework requirements for the course, and also give you something to put on your resume to show that you're certified in Lean Six Sigma. So just in time from a manufacturing perspective says I only produce what I need when I need it. And again, the shortfall there is if I only produce what I need when I need it, there's no safety stock built into the system in case there's some variations there. Another shortcoming or flaw, I think, within the just-in-time methodology. There's some steps in just-in-time, and I got the steps, so I'm not going to go through them here on the video and trying to keep the video concise and to the point and hit the highlights. But there's some steps in the slides on just-in-time. When you look at those steps, think back to when we talked about 6Sigma as a quality initiative, and it looks an awful lot like 6Sigma, only in a few more steps. But it's the same basic thing, because this is Joe's philosophy. 6 Sigma, the theory of constraints we'll look at in a few minutes, and just in time have the same basic foundation, that being what we saw when we talked about quality back in February with Stewart's plan, do, check, act cycle. They all share the same basic foundation there, which is the foundation for all continuous process improvement programs. There are 7 primary wastes. Now, I don't want you to memorize these 7 wastes, and obviously you don't have to, since this is an online course now, and obviously exam number 3, like exam number 2, is going to be all online and open book, open note. But I do want you to look at these very carefully and think about some of the implications. The waste of overproduction goes back to that idea of only make what I need when I need it. But it's also tied to another waste, and that's the waste of stocks. And I think those 2 pieces, the overproduction and the waste of stocks, is what originally gave Apex's idea of zero inventories. Didn't work. Somewhere here I've got a whole series of the Apex zero inventory papers from the early days when they first came out with them. And I like to go back and look at them and see how far off we were as a industry with our thought process at the time. This is the waste of waiting. Oh, that's not new to us. We saw that in the applesauce example. And the waste of transportation is putting on a truck and moving it somewhere. So for example, one of the ways I can do inventory is called the push system. The push system works on the methodology or the theory that I, as the manufacturer, I, as a supplier, have a better idea what you need than you do. It's not very efficient. But the problem with the push system is I ship you what I think you need. End of the month comes, you've got too much stuff because you didn't sell what I thought you would sell. So now you got to send it back to me so I can send it to somebody else who can sell it. Wasted transportation assets. There's the waste of motion. Well, we saw that in the applesauce example as well, when it moved from the docks to the waiting to something happened and moved again. So that waste of motion, moving stuff that doesn't need to be moved. And one of the things of lean just in time is if it moves an inch, it's still a movement. If there's no value added, don't do it. There's the waste of making defects. Not doing it right the first time. Go back to think about our cost of quality we talked about back in February. That waste of making defects and having to rework them again, or the waste of making the defects and then shipping it somewhere, and I got to ship it back to fix it. All these things add up to non-value added. So a simple way, at least from my perspective, a simple way of defining waste, these 7 wastes of just in time, is anything that does not add value is waste. It's adding cost, but not adding value. Back to our discussions in the first week of class. Every activity adds cost. Not every activity adds value. If it doesn't add value, it's waste. And the idea of just in time is eliminate all the waste, which kind of ties back to our discussions of competing on cost. We looked at the different ways to position the company. The pull system is another way of looking at inventory management and manufacturing. The pull system says, basically, you know better what you need than I do. If you think about Amazon, so you go to Amazon, and they're getting lots of business right now, obviously. You go to Amazon.com, you put something in your cart. So I'll put this item right here into my cart, ergonomic mouse. You put it in my cart. And when you put that in your cart, it says, people who bought this also bought this, this, and this. They don't ship you this, this, and this. They only ship you what you put in your cart and paid for. The push system would say, well, since people bought this, I'm going to send it to you. And if you don't like it, send it back to me. Now I've got the waste of shipping it to you, and then you got to ship it back to me. And then I got to unpack it and put it on the shelf again. Lots of waste involved in the push system. Not very effective. The pull system says, you know better what you need than you do, so I'm only going to ship it to you when you ask for it. No more, nothing less. And this idea of the Kanbans. The Kanban is literally translates as a card when you're going from Japanese to English. But somehow over time, the Kanban has also become synonymous with the signal, the system, and the container itself. So we can calculate how many containers I need in a Kanban system, how many Kanbans or containers I need with a simple calculation. When you look at the slides, you'll see that the calculation for the number of Kanbans looks a little similar because it's simply the reorder point divided by the container size. That's all it really is. The demand during lead time, times the lead time, plus the safety stock, divided by the container size. So it's this reorder point calculation we saw with inventory management divided by the container size. Now, this is an interesting calculation because this is the only calculation where I have the option of rounding up or rounding down. So when you look at the slides, you'll see an example there of the Kanban calculation. And I come up with a fraction of containers. Well, obviously, I can't have a fraction of containers. So the way this methodology works is, if I want to be conservative, and my recommendation when I was a consultant, when I was a practitioner in the Army, my recommendation was always be conservative, always round up. Because I don't want to run out of stock. I don't want to have an empty shelf. I don't want to tell a customer, sorry, we don't have it right now. Don't know when it's going to be here. I'm a believer in just in case inventory. So I always recommend rounding up. If the company's trying to squeeze more efficiencies into the system or squeeze inefficiencies out of the system, they're going to round down. We'll probably see Kanbans on the exam. Don't worry. I will tell you if I want you to round up or round down. If the company's conservative or they're trying to squeeze inefficiencies out of the system. But it's the only calculation all semester long we have that option, rounding up or rounding down. So when you look at the example, keep that in mind. I need to think about ways I can reduce the setup time. Because if I can reduce setup time, which is usually the longest piece of lead time in manufacturing, if I can reduce the setup time, I can reduce the manufacturing time, I reduce the cycle time, I can get it to you quicker. And there's some examples in the slide deck, a couple of them obviously from NASCAR. Ways to reduce the setup time so that I can get it done quicker and get on my operations. With just in time, there's been several Japanese words that found their way into our business lexicon. First one is jidoka. Jidoka is simply a Japanese word that when used in the just-in-time world means I'm giving you employee empowerment. I'm authorizing you to stop the manufacturing line if there's something wrong. When Harley Davidson was in Kansas City, they had a little yellow flashing light that if something was wrong, somebody on the assembly line could push a button, yellow light went off, and the entire assembly line stopped until they fixed the problem. The second Japanese word we've seen come into our lexicon, primarily through 6Sigma and lean and just-in-time, is this concept of poka-yoke. When you look at the slides, it looks like poka-yoke, something you'd hear from some dude ranch out west somewhere, but it's poka-yoke. It's literally to mistake-proof or idiot-proof the system. Quick example, in our classroom, when we were in there, there was a thermostat control. According to all the instructions I received on those thermostat controls, I can up the temperature in the room 2 degrees or down 2 degrees by turning the knob there. I've tried that knob in multiple classrooms in Cat Pet Hall, and it's never impacted the temperature whatsoever. I think it's poka-yoke. It's idiot proof. They've got it so Joe can't screw it up. I can't turn it up, I can't turn it down. But it makes me feel good thinking I'm adjusting the temperature in the room. Poka-yoke. It's kind of like the tachometer on your car. It's got the little dials, the gauge there, and it's got the red line. And when you get in the red line, it's telling you that you're revving the engine too fast. Newer vehicles on a tachometer, the red line comes on bright red. It lights up to let you know. So just in case you're an idiot and it's idiot proofing it for you, you can see, oh, look, I'm in the red area. I need to back off. The third Japanese word that's found its way into our business lexicon through just in time is Kaizen. Now, Kaizen literally translates for the greater good of everyone. But somehow in the last 15 years or so, it's become synonymous in business with continuous process improvement programs. They're the same thing, just a different name. Then why use Kaizen instead of continuous process? We've had continuous process improvement since Schubert in the 1920s. Nothing new. But if I use a Japanese word, I use a foreign word to describe the same thing, now I sound more sophisticated. It's the same thing. It's continuous process improvement methodology and giving you the power to stop the line, Jidoka, if something goes wrong. That's all it really is. The key with just in time is it's still evolving. It's going to evolve again now based upon the pandemic panic buying. It's going to evolve again, but what's important is that people are starting to realize that maybe just in time as an inventory methodology is not a good idea. And we keep learning this lesson over and over again. We learned it in 2001 after the 9/11 attacks when nothing moved for 4 days. And companies who had gone to strictly just in time ran out of products, couldn't make anything. We learned it again in the Army in 2003, and we wrote about it, the shortcomings of doing that. And now we're learning again in 2020. So every so many years, we learn the same lesson, which means we're not really learning, we're just making observations. So keep that in mind when you get into business, that sometimes just in time as an inventory methodology doesn't always work. One of my goals for this class is to show you that lean and just in time are the same thing. Told you Taiichi Ohno and Shingeo Shingo wrote about the Toyota production system. When we first brought it over to America and started looking at it, we called it just in time, and it stuck. However, in 1995, James Womack wrote a book called Lean Thinking. He'd previously written a book called The Machine That Changed the World. It was about the Toyota production system. He became enamored with it. So he actually got a literal translation from Japanese into English of Ohno and Shingeo's work. Turns out, lo and behold, that when they wrote about it in the 70s, they called it lean. Somehow we lost that in translation. So when Womack did his literal translation of Ohno and Shingeo's work, he called it lean, because that's what they called it. And it stuck. The amazing thing is when you look at it, it's got the exact same 7 waste, has the exact same goal: eliminate waste, improve quality, reduce cost. It's based upon the same writings. But in the quality world, half the folks will swear that just in time is a tool of lean, and the other half swear that lean is a tool of just in time. Folks are the same thing, the exact same thing. They're just a different translation of the same writings. We looked at 6Sigma before as a quality tool. Now I want to go back and relook at just briefly as a continuous process improvement tool. Because when you look at it, you think back, we talked about it as part of quality. When you look at it, it is indeed a continuous process improvement methodology. It's the same thing we saw with Schubert's plan, do, check, act cycle, only in 5 steps instead of 4. And you look at the steps of 6Sigma and look at the steps we saw a while ago or in the slide deck with just in time, they look very, very similar. And when we look at the steps of the theory of constraints, another popular continuous process improvement methodology, they're going to look the same as well. In fact, my theory is that just in time and lean and 6 Sigma and theory of constraints are just different names for the same basic methodology and different approaches to getting to the same answer. The theory of constraints came to us in 1985. An Israeli physicist, Dr. Eli Goldratt, wrote a business novel called The Goal. He was trying to take business practices, put them into everyday life to try to make them more realistic. It's a great reading for you. If you got some extra time this summer, it's all about yay thick. You can get a copy for a couple of bucks on Amazon or eBay. Take a look at it. Read it. It's an easy read. When he came out though with his first came out with his theory, he called it the process of ongoing improvement, thus insinuating it's a continuous process improvement methodology. Over time, it became known as the theory of constraints, which we saw with capacity that every system has a bottleneck or a constraint. And the constraint of the system is the capacity of the system. When you look at the steps, there's some focusing steps of theory of constraints. They look a lot like the same steps we saw with 6 Sigma and just in time. The goal of the theory of constraints, novel goal, make more money. And the way you make more money with the theory of constraints is by reducing inventory, because I increase the throughput or the capacity by increasing the capacity at the constraint. So I get more throughput. I have less work in process. I have less working capital tied up in it. So I make more money at the end. There's 3 questions to theory of constraints. What needs to be changed? What do we change it to? How to make the change happen? Okay, this is just Joe's theory. But I think to be effective, it really should say what needs to be improved. What is the improvement and how to make the improvement happen? Because I think it's important to remember and keep in mind that every improvement is a change, but not every change is an improvement. So I want to focus on improvements, not just changes. So look at the slides, look at the reading, do the Lean 6 Sigma certification for an area that interests you, either what's in your major, or pick one of those other areas that may be of interest to you. But I want this to be beneficial to you, both as a learning tool as well as a bullet for your resume when it comes time to apply for jobs. Till I see you again. I'm going to keep telling this until I see you in the hallways of Cat Fed in the fall. Till I see you again. Folks, stay positive. Saw an article this morning that there's an increase in the VA system, the Veterans Administration system, for calls to their online mental health line. People are having issues being closed up all the time. So stay positive, stay social, reach out to people, give somebody a call, see how they're doing. Give them a text. Hey, how you doing? What's going on? Haven't heard from you. FaceTime, I don't care, but be social. Be positive, be social, be smart. We're going to get through this. And the smarter we are doing this, the sooner we'll get through this. And stay well. Till next time around, have a great day.